Alright guys, welcome back. GM Light here. Today we're going to be talking about my favorite of the franchise, Saw 3. If you don't know what Saw 3 is about, it's about when Dr. Lynn Denlin becomes a pawn in the Jigsaw Killer's latest gory game. Kidnapped and taken to an abandoned warehouse, she finds Jigsaw bedridden and dying. Her task, keep the maniac alive long enough for Jeff, a fellow victim, to complete his own task. Each is unaware that Jigsaw has much bigger and deadlier plans in store. So Saw 3 is packed to the brim with everything I love about Saw. It's got plenty of interesting Jigsaw type storylines and layers to latch onto. It's got a great main trap and story, and it all ties together in such an interesting way. I dig how it picks up right where 2 left off. What it does is it really makes you feel like this is a cohesive saga, and this is kind of where that episodic feel of the Saw movies really begins. That lasts all the way until the final chapter. This is kind of exactly where it gets that grander sense of story, and it becomes a lot more serialized. Even though it does have that feeling to it, it still is a great closing to the trilogy. I think that Saw 1, 2, 3 just make a perfect Saw trilogy. This is just the meat of it, some of the best stuff in there, and the ending to Saw 3 just provides a very rich end to that story, and to Jigsaw's story. And since it has just such a powerful ending, it really does increase and change the stakes of this franchise. This movie probably has the most impact on the rest of the franchise, especially too with, spoilers if you haven't seen it, the death of Jigsaw. This is a plot line that the rest of the movies really work around. It's a pretty big focal point to the rest of the movies and how it impacts with disciples and other Jigsaws, copycats and things like that. So not only is it a very intense movie, it also has an incredibly large impact on the rest of the franchise. But also with that, it has all the good stuff. It has very gnarly traps, like the chain one, like the acid trap, but also the rack. They're very disturbing, they're very cringy, they'll make your stomach churn. I love it. But besides that, the characters also have a lot of complexity and depth. You get to see another kind of side to Jigsaw, but you also get another side to Amanda. I'd say Tobin Bell gives his best or maybe second best performance as Jigsaw in this franchise. With Saw 2 and Saw 3, this is where the majority of what he gets to chew on, especially too with his deathbed and the way that he reacts to knowing that he's dying. It gives him another side of Jigsaw to really tackle. Besides that though, Amanda is definitely a highlight in this movie. I think Shawnee Smith is very good in this role. You also get the pretty much fully unhinged Amanda this time around. With the first movie, she's kind of just like the victim. In the second movie, she comes back ostensibly as a protagonist, but you really only get to see a little bit at that end of Saw 2, that other side to her, the disciple side, where she's also part of this whole thing. This movie, you get full-on unhinged Amanda as a Jigsaw. And I also think that this movie kind of rights the wrongs of some of the past movies where the victims didn't have a chance to escape, and it turns out that it's because Amanda didn't give them a chance, and that's why she failed ultimately. It's very interesting stuff. I really dig it. I also love that layer of her character, and it fixes things like the key in the bathtub. Like, that isn't Adam's fault, so it kind of retroactively fixes some problems with previous movies. So with that, throughout this movie, you get to spend time with the real Amanda. She's not feigning anything, she's not being anything but who she really is in this movie, and she adds an interesting component to the franchise. Also, as far as main characters, Jeff is a very interesting character. He's very sympathetic. You get into his plot line, and it's very tragic and sad. It also doesn't feel like the way that he's tested is mean-spirited towards him. It really is at the expense of everybody that he's hated and cursed for all these years since his son died. You feel terrible for him and you want him to survive. With regards to what happens to the people that are getting or that are part of this test, since what they did is so reprehensible, the fact that the traps being so extreme makes you think about it. Does the guy in the rack deserve it? Because the rack is a pretty harsh thing to have happen to you, but at the same time, he's a drunk driver who killed a kid. So at what point do you feel sympathy for the people that are in these situations? The main game, it really does have a great setup. It's very intense, very brutal, honestly. And then going back to Jigsaw, there's intensity with his plot line, especially with the way that they rig the collar to where if he dies, the doctor dies. And that setup alone, it creates a lot of sequences that are just very cringy, suspenseful, like the one where she's operating on Jigsaw's head and she has to open up his skull with a power drill. Very, very, very intense, very disturbing, and also just adds a gritty effect to it. So with that, you know, it kind of makes it so that both the A and B stories are pretty compelling. You sympathize with Jeff and you understand why he's psychologically as fucked up as he is, and you're invested in Jigsaw. I'd be interested in anything Jigsaw did, but especially with this this specific setup of him being on his deathbed and just trying to cling to life for this one last game. It's all the characters and all the setups together that make this movie work so damn well. Also, by the very nature of the story, there's pretty high emotional stakes. The story puts Jeff in tough situations where he has to make tough choices, and Amanda's emotional volatility, Jigsaw dying, all the emotions just play right in the movie, and you really buy into it. Also, too, all parts of the test itself feel like they're thematically relevant to everything with Jeff. They work in the overall story and also have that sneaky kind of twist and unexpected connection with Jeff, the nurse, Amanda, and Jigsaw. So just like the second movie, it all ties neatly, and it gives you the feeling that this movie has deeper layers than the first two. Now, really any other movie that kind of follows this one, it doesn't feel like another run-of-the-mill Saw movie. It feels like there's more to it than that, and I think that this is definitely where it hit its peak and it was in a stride at this point. And it's unfortunate because 4 is kind of where things derail a little bit. I think that is a kind of significant drop-off from 3, but I'll get to that when I talk about Saw 4. But overall, Saw 3 is one of my favorite horror movies. I think one of the best horror sequels. It's my favorite of the franchise. I think just an overall awesome movie that encapsulates everything that I love about Saw. Let me know what you guys think of Saw 3 in the comments section. I'd love to hear. I'm GM Light. Have a good one.